Well, when it comes to theme parks, Epic Universe and Universal Studios are the talk of the town right now. Obviously, with a brand new theme park opening up on May 22nd and the first theme park on this level that we've seen in over 20 years, but also a spotlight is on Disney and what their response to Epic Universe is going to be and when these things will be done, as they did announce a slew of things coming to the parks back in D23 last year. But are these projects going to happen on time? Are they already being delayed? Because Disney themselves is sort of indicating that these things could be delayed. So we're going to read through some articles here that talk about this, get some thoughts on it, and perhaps see how this timeline is going to shake out with Disney's current slate of attractions and lands that they have said they are going to build. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And like I said, we got a few articles to look at. So the first one here is from Blog Mickey. And it talks about how the construction delay for Monsters, Inc. land at Hollywood Studios seems to be behind. And they said later this summer, construction will begin on a new Monsters, Inc. themed area at Disney's Hollywood Studios. The new land will replace the Muppets Courtyard area on the southeastern side of the theme park. Originally, Walt Disney World had announced that the first construction walls would arrive in the area before the end of March. And at this time, it was written in early April. Says there are no signs of construction walls yet. And I'm pretty sure there's still no signs of construction walls as of now. He said, notice that there were no construction walls and indicating a delay in the start of the project. He goes, now before anybody gets excited that this could mean a change in the project, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. In fact, I fully expect that the Monsters, Inc. themed land will not only move forward, but that it will move relatively quickly once the area closes this summer. Says, in fact, while there has been a delay in the arrival of initial construction walls, we fully expect Walt Disney World to stick with the previously announced closing dates for Mama Melrose Ristorante Italiano, Pizzerizzo, Muppet Vision 3D, and more. And as a reminder, Muppet Vision 3D and Pizzerizzo are supposed to close June 7th, and Mama Melrose Ristorante Italiano is supposed to close May 10th. So it seems there is a delay on that one to some extent. Now, this one is not involved with the things they announced at D23, but some new permit filings suggest that the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad refurbishment may take longer than what they initially said. And they said a newly filed permit from Walt Disney World suggests that the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad refurbishment has been extended. The new permit filed yesterday has an expiration date of April 15th, and this is more than a month later in the year than the furthest expiration date that we've seen while tracking the permits. Said previously we tracked a January 2025 permit that listed an expiration date of March 13th, 2026. Says while expiration dates on permits don't always align with reopening dates for attractions and experiences, they do give us an insight into how long the work could take. The January 2025 permit listed Coastal Steel as the contractor and general construction as the scope of the work. This new permit lists a different contractor. Taking a look at the most recent permit, we see that DPR Construction is listed as the contractor and the scope of the work is general construction. It's not uncommon to find a useless description with these types of permits given the leeway that Disney has been given over the years, but what is more interesting is the expiration date of April 15, 2026. What stands out to us about the expiration date is that it was manually entered. All permits have a standard one-year expiration date, which means this permit would have expired on April 17, 2026 anyways. The fact that the expiration date was manually entered seems to mean that the expiration date has some sort of significance, perhaps on an internal end date of the project. So, and one of the things about all of this is Disney already has a track record of building slow. And a lot of people, myself included, have wondered, with all this pressure from Universal and Epic Universe and the potential impact it could have. Obviously, we don't know what the impact will be. I do think Universal and Epic Universe are going to impact Disney's attendance. To what level? I don't know. I know Universal is going to see an increase, but I do think Disney, we're seeing them from the discounts and deals that they're running. They also seem to think that there's going to be an impact because they're running tons of discounts. They even got some of the hotel rooms under $100 this summer while after Epic Universe opens. So one of the things about this is how quickly are they going to get these projects built that are an answer for Epic Universe? Because as of right now, until these projects are done, Disney has nothing in terms of drawing people over to their parks with new attractions or new shiny things to check out other than just offering discounts and perhaps bringing back perks, which they can do, and that can help alleviating with the potential impact of the crowds. But, still it's going to be new rides and attractions are what's ultimately going to bring in the most crowds. So there is a lot of pressure on these things. So if we're already seeing a little bit of a delay on Monsters, Inc., We're already seemingly seeing a delay on Big Thunder Mountain. While not a new attraction, Big Thunder is a headlining attraction that people love and is a people eater. It moves a lot of people through it, and you're already talking about an area of Magic Kingdom that's going to be under heavy construction. And I hate to break it to you, but Rivers of America is going forward. I'm just going to say, I think you're going to see something on that very soon, and I don't think Disney's going to change their minds. That's all I can really say about it. But I think the people holding out hope that they were going to change their plans, which I was hoping to some extent maybe they would, given the backlash out there, I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think very soon, we're going to see construction starting in Frontierland, getting rid of the rivers and bringing in these couple of Cars attractions. We also saw permits being filed for trailers for Imagineering in this area. So this seems like it is going forward and it's going to happen. So this area of Magic Kingdom is already going to have no Big Thunder Mountain, heavy construction around this entire area. So that you're already going to have something that's an impediment for people to really come to parks, in that there's lots of construction going on. And how long is that construction going to be? And I think that's a legitimate question. And Disney themselves have basically said that there could be delays. Now, I'm not going to read this entire article because it's very long. This is from Disney Tourist Blog. But Bob Iger warns of tariff impact on Disney's $60 billion expansion plans. So essentially what this article goes through and talks about is Bob Iger went on some of the ABC News shows, I think it was like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, talking about how Disney's $60 billion that they've committed into the theme parks could be delayed or plans change due to the fact of the potential impact of the tariffs. Now, one thing I would note, and people have their thoughts on tariffs. We're not going to get into political things, but the tariff situation does seem to be rather fluid in that it can change almost by a day-to-day basis as, some deals are made with countries and all that stuff like that. So I think a lot of this is potential, and so they could take the approach of a wait and see, maybe wait out these tariffs, see how they end up impacting them potentially. And if they do that, a lot of these things will be delayed. And even since this article was written, a lot of this stuff has already changed because, again, it's a very fluid situation. And he says, Bob Iger's comments during the ABC News meeting were interesting, offering unfiltered insight into the company's contemporaneous thinking. I think I said that right. His position is unsurprising and in line with most executives and business leaders, regardless of their past political affiliations or donations. What is surprising to me is that Iger would have pointed to Disney Cruise Line as an impacted business. Perhaps it's just an easier and less abstract illustrative example since a ship is tangible, but I would think Disney Cruise Line is probably the business, at least on the Disney experiences side, that's least likely to be impacted by tariffs. Disney Cruise Line's new ships are built in Europe. They're complex and likely involve a flow of components from around the globe, but the principal construction and imports are to the European Union and not the United States. The end result, the completed ship is not an import to the U.S., either, as the ships are flagged as in the Bahamas. Because I don't doubt for a second that costs will increase for Disney Cruise Line to some extent, such as the nature of our interconnected global economy. My first thought when reading about the tariffs and their impact on Disney is that it could incentivize the company to put more of its eggs in the Disney Cruise Line basket. Because not just because Disney Cruise Line largely avoids the direct impact of tariffs, but also because there's the ability to avoid or at least mitigate the indirect impacts. Because whatever's going to happen in the economy is going to happen at a global level. But the Disney Cruise Line is the most nimble business. Ships can be moved around to different ports as demand dictates. And he says, even with the tariffs, it's hard to see Disney suddenly becoming less bullish on Disney Cruise Line in the long term. He says, Walt Disney World and Disneyland are very different stories. In addition to importing a variety of raw materials that will be subject to massive tariffs, Walt Disney World and Disneyland will import entire ride systems. To the best of my knowledge, all the major roller coaster manufacturers are based in Europe. Disney cannot and will not simply pivot to an American manufacturer that does not even exist or make the ride systems themselves. The cost in time and dollars would be greater than tariffs of an unknown duration. Instead, if the tariffs remain in place, Disney will pay more for roller coasters, ride systems, and a variety of raw materials. This means that Monstropolis, for example, will get more expensive to construct, at least potentially. It's unlikely that the plans for the coaster itself change at this stage in the game, as reworking them would also be costly. What's more likely is that Disney will reduce the investments elsewhere or cut corners on the project itself via unnecessary details or other elements that are deemed expendable. Which also gets into interesting territory, because when you start talking about Disney versus Universal, and I'm not going to get into the whole who's better and things like that. But obviously, if you've been paying attention, Universal has been pushing Disney. They've been doing things that they wouldn't have done on their own if it wasn't for the competition of Universal. I personally don't think that you likely would have seen Galaxy's Edge, Pandora Toy Story Land, these types of things being built, even the things that they announced at D23 coming to the parks, if it wasn't for the competition from Universal. I think Disney on their own would have had new things come, but I don't think they would have been to the lands like they were, because really Universal kind of changed it up in the theme park realm when they did the Wizarding Worlds with Hogsmeade. That was the first time you really had an entire land dedicated to one IP that was that immersive, and Disney in turn started doing their own versions of that. So I do think some things would have been built. I'm not going to try to guess what those would have been, but it would have been on a very different timeline. It would have been much slower to build. And, essentially look at Fantasyland back in the day when they built that. That took 7+ years, I believe, to get fully done. But given that Universal is pushing them, it is forcing Disney to spend more money in the parks than they would have without that competition. So undoubtedly, they are pushing Disney in ways that they haven't been pushed before. And now with Epic Universe, it's on a completely different level, because I've been to that park, and what they have learned from the Wizarding Worlds that they've done successfully, they've applied to an entire theme park. And everything that Disney builds from here on out is going to be directly compared to Epic Universe. Even Universal themselves. I mean, you build a park at that high a level, that much immersion, that much stuff going on, everything going forward is going to be compared to that. So you can make the argument the bar has been raised in terms of, on some experiences, what people are going to come to expect. And so whatever Disney plans to do is going to have to be to that level, because if it's not, people are going to notice it right off the bat. So them cutting quarters potentially is not a great sign if you're Disney, even if you have legitimate reasons. Let's say the tariff impacts do cost you more money in the long run. That is something that Disney is going to have to weigh with. But I think at the end of the day, people aren't really going to care, theme park fans, if these things are not up to the level of what people expect them to be, or the game changers that they need them to be. And so right there, you have a problem with Disney, because you can have legitimate reasons as to maybe why you need to cut corners, or why budgets need to be, cut, or maybe you try and wait these things out. But you also just have the comparison to what Universal is doing in a time period where Universal is going to be more aggressive. They've already stated they're going to be more aggressive. So if Universal is going forward with all their stuff, they're already, they announced we're replacing Rip Ride Rocket. They've already said they have a slew of things coming to the existing parks, expansions to Epic Universe. If Universal doesn't slow down during all of this and Disney does, that's also going to be something people are going to notice. And really depending about how much, or how much Epic Universe impacts Disney's attendance, does that also dictate how quickly these things get done? And if Disney is perhaps forced to spend more money than they initially planned to, or if they look to cut corners, it's going to be very interesting on that end if these things do impact them during this time period. And he talked about how some of the things that were put on pause around COVID have, continued construction, being the Reflections Lakeside Lodge, but other ones were canceled that were going to come to the Epcot overhaul, and we all know how the Epcot overhaul turned out. He goes, a similar approach is possible here with actual vertical construction on Cars Land and Villains Land in a holding pattern until the tariffs are lifted. Even so, site work can begin on these projects since it's not like dirt needs to be imported. Likewise, announcements for the back half of Walt Disney World's 10-year plan might be postponed or quietly canceled. He says it's easy to cancel something that hasn't been announced. Very, very true. Pausing park projects that have yet to begin, prioritizing Disney Cruise Line, and waiting out the tariffs seemed like the most straightforward outcome here for Disney's $60 billion 10-year investment plan. Construction that is already underway will likely continue on its current timeline, and the added expenses will be, quote, made up elsewhere, whether that means corner cutting on these projects or scaled back plans as offsets in Villains Lane and beyond. At the risk of stating the obvious, COVID and tariffs are also not the same. The parks were closed for multiple months then. There were projections of a 5-year recovery, and Disney went all in on streaming, which, lost a lot of money on the streaming side. Once the travel and tourism recovery did begin, it was difficult for Disney to pivot due to the streaming losses and the company's debt load. Today's circumstances are unique and very different from then. Ultimately, it'll be interesting to see what happens with investment at Walt Disney World as a result of the tariffs. Again, this is a preliminary assessment based on where things stand right now in this constantly evolving situation. I'm not convinced the current trajectory is the eventual one, which is why we're not offering more detailed thoughts. I actually completely agree with that. I think it's a very fluid, like I said, it's a very fluid situation, and a lot of these things could be solved and wrapped up, or they could linger. We just a lot of unknowns right now. And from a business standpoint, that is a difficult thing to know of just, where do these things stand? What do we do with these? So not only is Disney dealing with what potential impact Universal and Epic Universe are going to have, but they're dealing with this potential issue of increased cost as well, which is not a great place to be if you're Disney. That's a double whammy of all these things that they're trying to do to basically answer Epic Universe and are having more issues than they would have had years ago building a lot of this stuff. That's also why this doesn't touch on the demand side of the equation or operational cost cuts should Disney's worst case scenario play out. And before anyone gets excited about Disney canceling unpopular projects or undoing potential closures, you might want to think twice about that. An easy way to achieve OPEX savings is to mothball venues that are, quote, under construction. So as much as I might like to see Muppet Vision or the Rivers of America saved, the more likely outcome is an empty theater for years and the giant Epcot Dirt Pit Magic Kingdom edition. Yeah, and like I said, from what I'm hearing, Disney is moving forward on the removal of the rivers. I don't think anything's happening to that, even despite the fan backlash. And I think, I've also heard people say that people high up at Disney say that the loud fans are the minority and that they mostly look at Disney as a resort complex, and they're much more concerned with international travel and, people coming on big, infrequent vacations. That's kind of the group of people they're most concerned about, and not the online, Twitter X, YouTube critiques or criticisms of what they're doing or what they need to do. So I think that leads to all this stuff that's already been, they say they're going to do is going to happen. But what is the timeline? And I've talked about it before. Disney builds slowly. And until, and really the best predictor of future behavior is looking at past behavior, is this pattern recognition. So, Disney could build quicker and feel the pressure from Universal and really get these projects done in a quicker timeline. They got it done fairly quickly when you're talking about Galaxy's Edge compared to how they built in the past. But historically, they don't build very quickly already. Plus all these construction projects at the same time going on, plus these potential issues that these unknown things with tariffs could delay these things at a really bad time for Disney. Because again, even if there's legitimate business reasons as to these things costing more, it's still going to reflect badly on them, I think, from the fan base. And just once, people look at, the Epcot overhaul was affected by COVID, but people still look at what was built and just say, what is this? And I think you'll have the same thing here if this plays out. And Disney is they're in a spot they've never been before. I mean, to be quite honest, they've never had this much competition on the theme park side, and Universal themselves, and he didn't say in this article, but if there's a scenario, again, where Universal does not put pause on anything and they just continue to go because they have momentum, they're being very aggressive, and they have lots of money backing them from Comcast, that's also going to be something very evident to people that Universal is continuing and just going ahead with the things they're doing. Whereas if Disney takes them into a holding pattern and these things are delayed for years, that's a potentially risky scenario, because let's say Epic Universe does impact their attendance and they're really struggling to try and, get more people to come to the parks and make up that difference. Can they really afford? I mean, that's a scenario you'd have to sit there and look at a spreadsheet. Is it going to cost us more money to take this hit on the attendance side while waiting for these, potential issues to alleviate themselves on the cost side? Or does it just make more sense to pay more money to do these things to try and bring back attendance to the parks to make more money? That's something they would have to weigh with that. But I think the optics would be very clear that Universal would maintain momentum and Disney essentially would be in a holding pattern. And this could come down to really how the two companies sort of make their money. If you look at Disney, they're an entertainment company. For the most part, it's going to rely on, people having more discretionary income, people spending more money on fun and entertainment. Whereas Comcast, Universal's parent company, is a cable and internet provider. It's where they make most of their money. And cable has been shrinking for years, but internet's not going to go anywhere. So even if you have a downturn in the economy, people are not going to get rid of their internet. It's just part of everyday life now. So you can look at Comcast and Universal as having a much more steady income stream that's almost recession proof, if that's a worry out there. So they may not have the worry about that end like Disney does. And again, a lot of competition on the theme park side. That's where Disney makes most of their money. But the movie side is not as strong as it used to be. They had a good 2024, but thus far this year, not off to a great start. And overall, the past, I'd say 5 years has not been great on the movie side. MCU's, looking weak. We'll see how the future movies do, but it's not near as strong as it was back in 2019 with Endgame. You look at Star Wars, that's been fledgling. We'll have to wait and see how those movies shake out. Animation side has been hit and miss. There have been some movies that have made some really good money. There's been movies that haven't. And then obviously it's Snow White and Captain America this year that didn't perform very well. And they've already put on pause some of the live action remakes they'd already planned. So there's a lot of uncertainty. On top of all of this, a new CEO is going to come into the mix, presumably sometime in 2026. does the new CEO want to make their mark? Do they stick to these budgets? It's like, even if Bob Iger says one thing, a CEO could come in and completely do something different, because Bob Iger at this point is essentially, you could call him a lame duck CEO, because he's not going to be there, unless he changes his mind, I suppose, which he could do, for many more years. He's got until 2026 and he's out the door. So do these budgets get honored? Do these budgets perhaps get increased? Do these plans change? Like, they could with a new CEO. Who knows? Something could come in and change all these things. But I think ultimately, looking at all this, the potential delays on the Muppet Vision 3D area, the potential delays at Big Thunder Mountain, and the potential overall, Bob Iger himself saying that there could be some delays or budget cuts to the $60 billion expansion plans. And it's not the greatest thing to hear if you're Disney and looking at this potential obstacle, and also your biggest competitor. And these are uncharted waters for Disney. This current management has never had to deal with this much competition, especially on the theme park side, which is why, he mentions Disney Cruise Line. Disney recently invested $10 billion, maybe more, into the Disney Cruise Line. I think they look at the Disney Cruise Line as an area where they can grow a lot more without as much competition directly with them, like, say, on the theme park side, and some of the other issues on the streaming, on the movie side. So I won't be surprised if they move really heavily to the Disney Cruise Line end of things, and maybe they go into a holding pattern on the theme park side, because they feel like they can make up the difference by investing more in the Disney Cruise Lines with more ships and all those things they're doing there. But the optics would still be there with the theme parks and how those are looking over the next 5 to 10 years, because I've said many times, I think Universal is going to be very, very aggressive this next decade. I think they feel all the momentum. I think they feel like Disney is at a vulnerable spot right now. And if Epic Universe and everything we're hearing, seems like that park is going to be a great success. I've been there. It's a fantastic theme park. I'm sure it's not without its flaws. We're going to go back and check it out. I want to check out more stuff there. But overall, you're hearing very good things about Epic Universe. And on some level, how much does that hurt Disney now and in the next coming years is something we're going to have to find out. And does that impact their decisions? And even if they have these increased costs, do they move forward and just eat that cost? Because they really can't afford to delay these things with Epic Universe and what Universal is doing. That's a potential scenario out there. And also the other scenario is these things don't impact them, and they move forward with them, and they build them on the time schedules that they're, planning on building them on. So not only when these things get built, but how are they received once they're built? Because again, they're going to get compared to Universal and Epic Universe. How do these things go over? It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. It's kind of like a soap opera going on with how this stuff happens and works out. And we'll have to wait and see on it. I'm not making any predictions about this. I just see a few scenarios that can play out here. And ultimately, if you're Disney, it's a tough place to be. And I got to say, on Disney's side, I wouldn't want to be the CEO that steps into this potentially, because I think you're not having the best scenario laid out for you to step into this in the midst of everything like this going on. And just about every business venture Disney has, there is some sort of issues going on that need to be resolved. So it's not like you're stepping into just a hunky-dory situation. You're stepping into something that is going to require, somebody being very good at the helm and navigating these uncharted waters for Disney, really, at least in the past 20 years. But either way, it's going to be very exciting, I think, the next decade to see this, battle with Disney and Universal, because, again, they are competitors. They do offer different things with their theme parks, but they obviously are competitors with each other. And we'll have to wait and see how Epic Universe impacts Disney, to what extent, what is Disney's response, how quickly do they move on construction on things. We will find out very soon, I do believe, on that. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.